In the 1920s, average Americans could afford cars and other new inventions. By the start of the Great Depression, they could barely even spend their money on food. Banks collapsed, businesses closed, and also, people were getting fired day by day. Suddenly, for them, life didn't seem as easy as it used to anymore. Black Tuesday was the fourth day of the stock market crash of 1929. It was the worst day in the history of the New York Stock Exchange. It is also known as the start of the Great Depression of 1929. Within hours, the stock market lost all gains of the entire year. More than 16 million shares were sold as the stock market collapsed in the Great Crash. Billions of dollars were lost, and many speculators who had bought stock on margin lost everything they had. Why did it happen, you may ask? It's because investors were gambling, often with money that they don't even have on, and this caused the banks to fall. The other reason for the panic was the new way that stocks were bought. Many investors had placed huge stock orders using money they borrowed from their brokers, called buying on margin. When stock prices fell, the brokers called in the loans. Many people found their entire life savings wiped out to pay off the loan. Some of them realized what fools they had been. Many Americans experienced wage reductions. Unemployment rates skyrocketed. Luxuries were forced to be forfeited. And to top it all off, the Dust Bowl occurred at the same time. Farmers couldn't sell crops because of overproduction. For your information, farmers had been suffering even before the Great Depression. Between 1934 and 1930, nearly 1 million farmers failed to pay their mortgage and lost their farms. Banks foreclosed on their lands and houses, and to make matters even worse, the Great Plains was suffering through an ecological disaster that lasted for years. As a result, many more farmers lost their farms and moved. They traveled about the country looking for work and survival. New farming method made the drought conditions worse. Farmers had to move onto the plains and plowed under much of the natural grasses in order to plant oceans of winter wheat. The landscape shift tipped the ecological balance of the region. In the past, plains grasses prevented the topsoil from blowing away during a period of drought. By the early 1930s, that dwindling grassy safety net could no longer do the job. The dust storms moved as fast as 100 miles per hour and blotted out the sun. Hoover decided to reverse course and urged Congress to create the RFC, which stands for Reconstruction Finance Corporation. He gave more than $1 billion of government loans to railroads and large businesses. He put the federal government at the center of economic life. But it didn't work well under his guidance because all too often, bankers did not increase their loans to businesses. However, Hoover succeeded with one project that made a change. Secretary of Commerce Hoover had called for the construction of a dam on the Colorado River. When Hoover became a president in 1929, Congress had approved the project as part of a massive public works program. Workers broke ground on Boulder Dam, which later renamed Hoover Dam. Construction brought much needed employment to the Southwest during the early 1930s. President Roosevelt soon started government programs to give food and shelter to the needy. These programs were known as the New Deal. It had three goals, which are relief, recovery, and reform. These New Deal programs helped all Americans and gave jobs to millions of people. AAA, or the Agricultural Adjustment Act, ended overproduction and raised crop prices. By 1934, farm prices began to rise. One act created the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, which insured bank deposits up to $5,000. In the following year, Congress established the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, which is to regulate the stock market and make it a safer place for investments. Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, built a series of dams in the Tennessee River Valley to control floods and to generate electric power. TVA's success in improving life have ensured its survival to the present. CCC, or Civilian Conservation Corps, provided jobs for more than 2 million young men. They replanted forests, built trails, and so on. FDR also called the CCC his favorite New Deal program. The Federal Emergency Relief Act, FERA, granted federal funds to state and local agencies to help the unemployed. The short-lived Civil Works Administration, CWA, provided jobs on public works projects. Public Works Administration, PWA, built bridges, dams, power plants, and government buildings. By 1939, many Americans still did not have jobs, but the economy was improving. Since Roosevelt's presidency, the federal government has been a bigger part of Americans' lives. There were two parts of criticisms of the New Deal. The first says too much and the second says not enough. Two examples from both sides are Alfred E. Smith, who believed the New Deal made the government too powerful, and Francis Townsend, who felt the New Deal did not do enough to help older Americans devastated by the Depression. He proposed a pension plan funded by a national sales tax. The role of the government expands and began to do things it had never done before, from withdrawing taxes directly from workers' paychecks to distributing benefits to the elderly. The federal government accepted responsibility for spurring economic growth, or pump priming. For the first time, the government had acted as an employer of the unemployed and a sponsor of work projects.